This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated. Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Before I bring on our very special guest tonight, and I mean it, sit tight. We got a good one. Before I do that, though, I want to take a moment to thank Dr. Jamie Glazov for allowing me and giving me the opportunity to sit in for him for the last few weeks. And then I want to thank you all for all of your kind words, supports. I've been looking at the comments. I've been reading your emails. I'm very grateful for you being here. It has been an honor and a privilege to be here in such an important seat of Dr. Jamie Glazov. This is my last week. I will come back at some point, but good news for you is Dr. Jamie Glazov will be back next week to his regular programming. And I also want to thank you, all of you who made a donation. As you know, this is a fan-generated show, so none of this is possible unless you contribute, and many of you have in the last few weeks. If you haven't yet, you can go to jamieglazov.com, make a contribution of any amount. And if you can, that's completely all right. Just send that link of jamieglazov.com to a friend or family member who can make a contribution so we can keep going. Okay, that was my thank you to everybody who allowed me to sit here for the last few weeks. It has been an amazing experience. But I figured for the last show, at least for now, I cannot do, well, I have to outdo all the other weeks, right? So it is my honor and privilege to introduce our guest this evening, Nate Cain. He is a congressional candidate, a patriot, and also, if you don't know his name, you might know the Uranium 1 whistleblower. Hi, Nate. Thank you so very much for joining us tonight.
Hi. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely my honor. We have an hour, and I want to talk bare minimum, so you get to talk the most. So let me start here. Tell our audience just a little bit about your background and basically, I want you to establish why are you the credible guy to sit here today and tell us about the things you're about to tell us, and what makes you very reliable as far as Uranium 1 case goes.
Sure. So I have been in cybersecurity for the last 26 years. I started off in the United States Army after getting out of the Army after 3.5 years of service. I ended up going to work for DISA as a defense contractor, and then eventually was hired by the United States Navy as a Navy civilian. From there, I served for several years in the Navy, and then ended up going into the Marine Corps as a Marine civilian. And while I was at the Marine Corps, I was on a cyber protection team that was detached at the national mission. We were put on basically going after hackers that were hacking our national critical infrastructure. And so I was detached to NSA, was trained at NSA school at FANX, and was also, brought into, the intelligence community in that way, and read on to several of the programs that are used for surveillance and those sorts of things. After that experience, and I was only there for a short time, for about a little over a year, and I got offered an incredible amount of money to leave that and go join the FBI as a contractor. They were implementing a system for their vulnerability management, and I was an expert in that system. And so I was hired to architect and design and then deploy this vulnerability management system across all of the FBI and their various field offices. So, they offered me twice my salary, so I couldn't turn it down. And I ended up going to work at the Information Assurance Division. And this would have been in 2016, the Information Assurance Division of the FBI. While I was there, I overheard a conversation that I wish I hadn't heard, but unfortunately, it is what it is. And it was a conversation about the FBI's leadership planning to cover up crimes that had been committed by Hillary Clinton and her associates related to everything from Uranium 1 to money laundering, to terrorism finance, public corruption, and securities and exchange fraud. So I at first didn't know whether I believed it. So I went in to go see for for myself. I had access to the FBI's classified network, and so I did a search on some key terms within their database, and um, I found a lot of documents that indicated that there were multiple investigations on those subject matter, looking into Hillary Clinton and her the Clinton Foundation and CGI Global and several others that she was related to. All of these had analyst notes and they had intelligence analyst notes in them that had looked into these things and had determined a probability, of criminal activity. And so I thought for sure they were going to indict Hillary Clinton. And so after James Comey came out in front of the J. Edgar Hoover building and announced to the whole world that no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case against Hillary Clinton for, having classified emails on her server, and listening to him first lay out, the depth and the scope of those classified documents, which 14 of them, I believe, were what they call SAPs, which are Special Access Program. Having a top secret clearance for the last 26 years, I know all about classification. And what that means is to have those types of documents on a private email server is a pretty serious offense. You can't get a SAP out of a SCIF without going through very specific means in order to get that information. You have to, number one, be read onto that information to have access to it. It's compartmentalized. It's only found in a SCIF, where you have top secret access. So there's no like interconnections through the internet. It's not like you can leak this information by accident, which sometimes does happen between secret and unclass. But there's no way this could have happened but by somebody who, with intent, knew what they were doing to take it out of a SCIF. And so I was shocked when I heard him, make that statement, because I've certainly been read onto multiple programs and have been warned my entire career that if I ever mishandle classified information, it would be considered under the Espionage Act, and I would be, looking at hard jail time, for that. And so to see her have these emails, on her personal email server in her bathroom, blew my mind. And I realized at that point that everything else that they were investigating in her, they had no intent of bringing any charges, that they were going to completely whitewash all of her crimes and, end up, basically letting her go. And that's exactly what happened. So at that point, I determined that I couldn't just ignore it. I've taken the oath to our Constitution.
Can I interrupt, Nate? Let me interrupt
Sure.
for a second. So if that, in many cases, I have always had this question. If the case was for them to never bring any charges up against her, then why the investigation? Why would they even open the investigation? What is the point there?
So I think the field offices, the investigations were opened up not by, the leadership of the FBI. The investigations are opened up by field offices. They may learn of a crime or get a tip or something. And so they begin investigating. But what has happened is the FBI, which used to be very much compartmentalized like that, where a field office would run its investigation, to the end. Now, if there's anybody that is a political figure or somebody that has, some sort of, high visibility target or something like that, it's not uncommon for the FBI headquarters to pull that case in to FBI headquarters and basically, control, where it goes. And this is what we saw happen with, things like the raid on Mar-a-Lago. It was all people from Washington, D.C. that went down there. And we've seen this where there's been a complete politicization of the FBI. Didn't used to be this way. It used to be that, a field office would work its case and they would, follow it to its conclusion. But I think it was like there was a field office in Little Rock. There was a field office somewhere in Texas. I can't remember where exactly. There was one in New York. And there were multiple field offices that were investigating, these matters. So they essentially were doing their job when FBI headquarters pulled in those cases and basically said, we're putting an end to this. And so they stopped, all the investigation from going forward. But so when I saw this information, I couldn't ignore it. I've taken an oath 3 times in my life, swearing to support and uphold, support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And clearly what we had here was we had a domestic enemy in the form of the Justice Department, in that they were unwilling to bring a legitimate case against a political figure because it didn't suit their narrative or what they wanted to do. It showed extreme bias, and it showed obstruction of justice was actually the charge that I brought to the Inspector General. But the people that were involved in this, so I took these documents, and I had a courier card, which allowed me to carry classified information up the top secret outside of the FBI, following certain procedures, of course. So I made arrangements to meet with a senior staffer to Devin Nunes, who was at the time the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence chairman. And I ended up meeting with, and this was October 31st, actually, of 2017. I ended up meeting with this senior staff member. We drove around Washington, D.C. while I debriefed him for about 3 hours. During that conversation, he did not want to see my badge, which I thought was kind of interesting, because I was willing to show it to him to show that, I was legitimately somebody working at the FBI. But his words to me were, well, look, it's probably better that I don't know who you are. And the reason is because they were under the belief that they were being surveilled by the intelligence community. So I want you to think about that for a minute. This is somebody who works for the committee in Congress. These are our representatives who are supposed to have oversight over the intelligence community. And yet they believed they were under surveillance by that same intelligence community. And so their concern was that if I gave them my name, that and it ended up on any documents, that the likelihood would be that the intelligence community would find out who I was and blow my anonymity and bring down whatever retribution they wanted on me. So
I'm so sorry. I'm going to interrupt you again one more time. I'm
Sure.
just going to play absolutely clueless here. Okay, so at this point, until we get here, you have not committed a crime. You haven't broken any law. So, but even with that, this person is concerned that if your identity is known, something might happen to you, even though you haven't broken the law. You haven't committed a crime, especially compared to what you're investigating.
Sure.
But there's still a concern. Would it be safe to say, when some of us say we are in absolute state of lawlessness, this would be a good example for that?
Yes, I would say that it is a matter of, we do not have a federal government that is following the Constitution. The Constitution is very clear about things like our right to be free from illegal searches and seizures, and that would include warrantless searches. That stuff does go on today. There is warrantless searches that are happening right now as we speak. And then there are illegal searches which did achieve a warrant, but were essentially given on the basis of false information. And some of that is with the FISA courts, or what they call the FISC, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Courts. These FISA warrants are issued by these secret judges, and there's no representation representing the person whose rights are going to be given up. But the fact is that IG Horowitz did an investigation into these types of warrants, and I think they took 21 warrants just at random. And out of those 21 warrants that they took at random, over 80% of them did not meet the requirements to where they should have been given a warrant. And that was due to information that was either withheld from the judge or just outright lies in the search warrant applications. So we know this kind of thing happens, but there's also, there's also other ways that they get around things. They get around it by going to our allies and asking them to spy on our behalf on Americans that maybe that they don't want to. They know they're never going to get a search warrant, and so they'll go to the Brits or to New Zealand or Australia, or Canada. The Five Eyes are typically who they'll use, and they'll ask them to spy on Americans because they know that they're not restricted by the Constitution. And the other thing that they'll do is, and this is to me one of the most dangerous ones because it's very hard to for us to even know about, which is that all of these companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, the big tech companies, and I also believe that even I would go so far as to think that there's probably like major news distribution services as well that are on the payroll of the FBI, on the payroll of the Department of Homeland Security, on the payroll of the CIA, where they're able to go and basically suppress stories. We've seen this with the Twitter, the recent Twitter files that have been released and talked about by Matt Taibbi. This is a huge concern because now you have the government directly involved in censorship, directly involved in shutting down the accounts of Americans. My Twitter account, for example, I had almost 200,000 followers on Twitter, and even still, after all the changes that have been made by Elon Musk, which I'm grateful for, I still have not been given my account back. I've appealed 4 times, and I've gotten no response. And so I have to wonder if my account was put on a list by, like, say, the FBI. There are things that are going on in that regard, and those are violations of the First Amendment. But then there's also violations of the Fourth Amendment that are occurring as well. And that's things like, when these companies are collecting data on us, right? They're collecting data on our private messages. They're collecting data on, what we are talking about to people, and what we think is a private channel, or they're, collecting data on our communications. In some cases, they're collecting data on our actual conversations just by the mere fact that our phone is a listening device. And they're able to go and gain this information without a search warrant from these companies and basically violate, again, our Fourth Amendment rights by proxy of these companies. I've signed many of the non-disclosures that I can't get into detail on, but I will say that there are agreements made with big tech corporations and the federal government that deal with issues of immunity and things like that. All of these things, I think, need to be exposed. I think they all need to be spoken about and investigated by Congress. And I think that there needs to be an adjudication process that is outside our Department of Justice, because I do not trust them at all. I think they've become completely corrupted. They will not investigate themselves, period. They're not going to investigate themselves or adjudicate themselves. So we need a specialized court to be set up by Congress to investigate these matters and to adjudicate it.
Right, and here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be the Debbie Downer for a second, who's gonna state facts. I can't help but to think, Nate, since I'm gonna say somewhere around 2010 on forward, it seems like it doesn't matter what's being investigated, what's being exposed, what's out there, it just doesn't seem like to be bothering anyone. The left is happy about all the corruption. The right seem to be so busy inner fighting each other that they don't even see what's going on outside of the inner fight. It's the entire country. I'm going to narrow everything down into America because I'm a human rights activist, so I have a habit of going over outside of borders. But for now, inside America, it seems like since 2010 until today, and I will say this with a straight face, thanks to Hussein Obama, the division in the country, the gap became beyond comprehension. The inner fights started. Pointing finger at each other started. The cliche started. Labeling started. So I'm not sure if any investigation or any exposure of, how many exposing videos, evidence, you're one of them. You had solid proof and it literally went nowhere. So with all that being said, There has to be another, there needs to be another step. In my understanding, there needs to be a step, and it's called United We Stand. We got to remind our fellow Americans we're all at one nation under God. The rest comes later.
Well, remember, January 6th, okay, was it was not an insurrection. What it was a bunch of Americans that felt united that they had seen their elections, stolen from them. And so these people were there exercising their First Amendment right to gather peaceably, to make their grievances known to their government. And regardless of what, some people on the left or the media, mainstream media wants to say, 99% of the people there were peaceful. There were a few people who were, rebel rousers, which we're now beginning to find out, many of them were Antifa or they were FBI, informants, working on their behalf to, create a false flag event. But the reality is that these people were there peaceably to let their grievances be made known. And why did the FBI go to such extents to arrest over 1,000 people? Why did they go to, kicking down people's doors to drag them out of their home for basically committing nothing more than a minimal, crime of trespassing, even if you could call it that, walking around, inside the rotunda after they were let in by the cops. So why did the FBI come down so hard on them? It was simply for one reason. They wanted to intimidate the American people so they would never rise up again. I believe that is exactly what happened. And so there is a legitimate fear by many Americans now that they will not go down to Washington, D.C. They will not protest, because if they do, then the likelihood is we'll have another January 6th and they'll be thrown in jail. They'll have their lives disrupted. They'll have themselves dragged through the courts. They'll lose their businesses, lose their jobs, you name it. So the question is what can be done? And I believe that the answer to this really, it resides in our representatives. It resides in our representatives, and specifically with the ability that Congress has that's identified in the Constitution under Article 1, Section 8. There is the ability for the Congress to create a special court. It's called a Article 1 tribunal. And what it would allow Congress to do is they would get to appoint judges to adjudicate agency issues. They would be able to appoint judges to address these issues that they believe that the courts are unwilling to address. The current, what they call Article 3 courts, so your appeals courts and your appellate and courts. An Article 1 court is still under the Supreme Court, but it allows for them to do to basically set up a series of trials to address these different issues. Now, you would also still need some way of prosecuting these cases, so you would probably need a special prosecutor. But nonetheless, until there is accountability, these problems are never going to go away. People need to be investigated, arrested, and jailed for their crimes, they've committed against the American people, for their violations of oath of office, for their deprivation of rights, under color of law that have been committed against the American people. That sort of thing has been going on for too long, and it's time, that we end up putting an end to it. The only ones that can do that are our representatives, and they would have to do that through a court. It would be helpful, obviously, if we had an administration, a president that was, willing to clean up things. But the current president that we have right now, he is a tyrant. He does not want to see these powers go away. And there's a lot in Congress who don't want to see these powers go away. Now, I have to ask myself, why is it that they would be willing to allow and continue to vote for appropriations that empower these agencies to continue to violate our rights? And there are only two reasons that I can think of why they would do that. Either they have drank the Kool-Aid and they believe that this is what's necessary in order to keep us safe, and thereby they are in violation of their oath because they are not defending the Constitution anymore, and they should be removed on that behalf, or for that reason. Or the other reason is that these tools have allowed the intelligence community, and I'll just say it, has allowed the intelligence community to blackmail them and allowed them, they've become compromised. The Russians used to call it kompromat. I think that it's very likely that our intelligence agencies have kompromat on several congressmen and judges and other officials, and they use this in order to get them to do what they want. And I think that is a huge danger to our republic. I think it needs to be exposed, and I think it needs to be dealt with, in a court of law. I'm not, when I say a tribunal, I'm not talking about torches and pitchforks. I'm talking about a legitimate process that our Constitution allows for us to do. But it takes courage on behalf of the Congress, and it takes Congress people who are not compromised, by kompromat, who will, basically do what is right in the interest of the American people, and who will not allow themselves to be the tools, of these enemies of the state. So that is, I believe, the solution to the problem. It is the reason that I am, one of the reasons I am running for office, going through what I've been through as a whistleblower and having my home raided because I, did a service to my country and blew the whistle on criminal activity, having my family targeted because of that, going through the things that I've gone through. Some people, when they go through something like that, it shuts them down. For me, it has had the opposite effect. It has given me resolve that I don't think I would have had before. I know that at the end of the day, that it is going to take courage to deal with these things, and I'm willing to do it. I've already been down that road. They've already come after me with everything they could, and I don't see it as really having anything to lose, but everything to gain by doing this. We have a country that is relatively free, and I say relatively because we have these problems going on right now in our Justice Department. But I think if we can gain back our freedoms and get control through exposing these criminal activities that are going on inside the intelligence community and our Department of Justice, and we can actually get transparency in government again, then I think we can have a free country again. But it's going to take people who are going to be willing to do the right thing, no matter the cost. And you asked a question earlier as to, what qualifies me or what, separates me. And the thing is I've already been tested. I've already been tested and passed that test. When I had everything to lose, when I was working at the FBI, I was making the most money I've ever made in my life. It was twice my salary from when I was, in the working for Marfor Cyber and detached to NSA. I had, the possibility that I could have my clearance revoked. I had the possibility that I could be jailed. I had the possibility I could be killed. I mean, I was dealing with going up against the FBI, going up against, the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world. I went up against Hillary Clinton. And I think everybody knows, why somebody should be concerned and, about going up against her. And then I was also going up against Russian intelligence agents that were involved in all of this, bribery and kickback scheme with Uranium 1 and specifically with Rosatom. So by the world standards, every reason for me not to do it was there. And then on top of it, I was making the best money, and all I had to do was turn a blind eye and just keep on working. And I would have made, continue to make, massive amounts of money. And yet I chose to do the right thing and put myself at risk and my family at risk. And I paid a heavy price. I paid a heavy price, but it was one that I willingly took, and one I would be willing to take again, because I do believe in something that is higher than all of these other, higher than the federal government, the FBI, more powerful than Hillary Clinton, more powerful, than Russian intelligence agency, and that's God. And I have a firm, strong faith in God, and that is what drives me. That is the only thing I fear, is God. I don't fear any of these other people or what they can do to me.
Amen. Nate, let's do this. We are up for our sponsor break. Let's take a 1 minute sponsor break. When we come back, we will continue the discussion. Our audience, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell. Years ago, when I invented My Pillow, I was faced with every adversity you could think of. No retailers wanted to sell My Pillow. That's come full circle. Vendors took advantage of me, and I was copied by China. Well, by the grace of God, I was able to get through all that and learn from it. I have a passion to help other U.S. entrepreneurs, and that's why I created my new platform, mystore.com. We have hundreds of products from amazing entrepreneurs, and to celebrate, I'm going to put My Pillows on mystore.com right now. You can get my standard My Pillows regularly $69.98, now only $19.98 with your promo code. Or you can get my standard queen size, regular $79.98, now only $29.98. Or you can get my premium king size, regularly $89.98, now only $34.98. So go to mystore.com and use that promo code on your screen to get huge discounts on all My Store products. Thank you and God bless.
Welcome back to Glazov Gang. Thank you so much for staying with us until now. We always appreciate you. And yes, you can go to mystore.com or mypillow.com. Use the promo code GG, Glazov, GG21. And you get discount, we get credit. And that is another way you can support this programming. I am joined by Nate Cain. We are discussing, well, all things corruption versus all things good. Nate, before we took our sponsor break, I am very, very glad that you chose to do the right thing. And yes, I agree. In a very different way, I kind of do what you did in an opposite direction of Islamization. You know, being an ex-Muslim, former child bride, doing what I do has so far earned me 12 bounties on my head. But that doesn't matter because I'm kind of on the same page. The only answer I make sure I have when I'm asked is from God. When I'm asked if I did the right thing, I want to make sure I can say yes, I did. But I think that could be a huge part of the problem. Let's quickly go back to what I always refer to for last 2 years: COVID, lockdowns.
Yeah.
Many of the people I knew personally, and I thought they are on our side and they're gonna fight for our freedoms, yada yada yada, gave into the lockdowns and the mask and the double mask and the triple mask and the vaccine and the booster and the 7th booster because they didn't want to lose their paycheck. They didn't want to lose their home. They didn't want to lose their friends. They didn't want to lose their followers on Facebook. On and on and on and on. That was one of the best times of our lives to know how humans are willing to give away, literally volunteer away their freedoms for convenience, for fitting in and not being singled out. But then at the same time, I came to America with the understanding that what makes an American is, home of the free because of the brave. America is supposed to be filled with bravery. What happened? Right. Where did all the brave Americans go?
That's a good question. I think, part of it, I think, is that, Khrushchev had threatened the United States back in the 80s. And he said that, he would destroy America from within without ever firing a shot. And I think, even going back even prior to that in 1914, there was a book that I read. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it was a book written in 1914. And this author was speaking about the problem of the Bolsheviks. And he warned America that they would attempt to infiltrate our school systems, our education institutions to get to our kids. And I think that is what we are seeing today, is we have seen this degradation of the family. It's why we see all this issues. It's gone so far beyond, them working in secret. I think they used to try to work in secret to destroy the family. Hollywood was a lot of, involved in that. The school systems of the National Education Association, the unions and the schools have been involved in that. But something has changed. Something has shifted in the last, 5 years. And I think what has happened is, I think that they've taken off their masks. They have shown themselves for who they really are. They clearly are targeting and coming after our kids, whether it's the groomers, whether it's this transgender issue. The going after, our kids with the intent of spreading LGBTQ woke ideology. It is an ideology. It's almost like a religion for them. It is more than just people wanting freedom. This is about trying to indoctrinate our youth. It's also when you saw this happen in the rewriting of history. Was it the 1819 project? Them trying to redefine history. I mean, they can't even define what a human is anymore. They don't know the difference between a man and a woman. How can we expect them to be able to know, the truth about what happened with history? But they've basically gone and attempted to erase everything about America that was good. America, just like any other country, has had its sins. But the fact is that America as a whole has stood for freedom, has stood for independence, has stood for the rights that are God given to us from the very beginning, from the very founding of our country. Those things have mattered, and we've had to work out some of those issues, with even a civil war when it came to slavery and things like that. But the reality is that our kids have been being taught that America is this evil place, and that it is this terrible place, and there's institutionalized racism and all of this nonsense. Most of these people have never lived outside this country. Many of these people probably never even been outside this country, let alone lived outside of it. I have. I lived in Japan for 3 years. I lived in Korea for a year. I've traveled the world because of my military service. I know what America, is like, and I know how great it is, even with its problems. It is. If it wasn't so great, then why would we have millions of people, trying to get across the border illegally every day? The fact is people know that America is a land of prosperity, but that prosperity, it doesn't come for free.
Intro for 1 second. What you're saying is absolutely correct until about 10 years ago. 10 years ago to today, some of those people are coming here to experience the American dream, but a lot of them are coming here to actually destroy America as we know it. A lot of these who are crossing border illegally are the Hamas members and IRGC members and Czech people and Uzbekis to come here to take away, perfect example, to join people like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who are working so hard to take away our freedom. So that is actually a bigger point. How good could one land be that the enemy is trying so hard to infiltrate from every angle to take it down?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that word enemy. So obviously we have our physical enemies, and you have these, anti-American terrorist, leaning groups, the Islamist groups. You have these groups of that come here with socialist and Marxist ideas, and a lot of people have no idea about the history, even of socialism within the Middle East. But it is everywhere. North Africa and the Middle East. A lot of these governments are socialist in nature, and the reason they're socialist is because socialism is the best way to control the people. If they don't have the means to be an entrepreneur, and the means of being able to have free speech, and the means to be able to do things to make their lives better on their own, and they are dependent upon the government, then the government has total control. And that is what we are seeing that they are trying to bring here to America. There was a time when even Democrats were opposed to socialism, and that is not the case anymore. The Democrats have become socialists. There was a time where where communism, it was illegal you could not be a communist and be in Congress. That was a law that was removed under Barack Obama. Okay. So I think that is part of what we're seeing, but there's another enemy that I don't hear talked about enough. And that is, we have a spiritual enemy, and that enemy has been working against America for a very long time. And it has been like a cancer, that travels underneath the surface of the skin. We don't see it until it comes out, either in the form of a tumor, and it breaks through, or it starts affecting the functioning, of your organs and things like that. People don't know about cancer when it's small and undetectable. It's not until it starts to cause problems in their lives that they learn about it. And by then, oftentimes it's too late. I'm hoping that it is not too late for America. I am hoping and I am praying that we can turn the ship around. But to be honest with you, we are dealing with a spiritual demonic force that is attacking our country. And if we think that we are going to fix this problem by, policy and, good politics and getting the right people in office, or, having the right laws, or, none of that by itself will solve this problem. We need a spiritual revival in our country. We need a generation of people who have hope in God, who learn and have a relationship with God, who have a fear of God. I think the reason that people do things and think that they're going to get away with it is they lack a fear of God. Even when I was in Japan, and Japan is not a very religious country. They're, I would say, more superstitious than religious. But, the majority, I think they're less than 0.1% Christian. But the thing is that they don't have a lot of crime there. And the reason why is because they have a fundamental belief in karma. They believe that if they do something that, something bad, that it will come back on them. And so they have a very, fundamental, very, rudimentary belief or fear of God in a way, fear of the universal principle of karma. In America, we used to have a fear of God, and that would keep people from doing things. It's why, we still to this day have people swear and take their oath on the Bible, when they're in court. But it means nothing if people have no fear of God. If they don't believe in consequences in the afterlife for the things that they do in this life, then there's nothing to hold them back from being as evil as they possibly can to their own advantage. And that is, I believe, what we are seeing in America today, is we've seen a complete casting off of all restraint due to a lack of fear of God, a lack of faith in God. And then we see a hopelessness like we've never seen before, especially with our youth, high anxiety levels. So going back to this issue of COVID, what you were saying, that issue of COVID, you're right. It was a test. And I would say, for the most part, we failed as a country. When churches shut their doors and allowed the government to tell them that, you need to shut your doors, that told me these churches weren't working for God. They were working for man. They were dependent upon their tax breaks or whatever they get from the IRS. They should have said no, and they should have fought and should have taken their cases to the courts. When people, had their companies, threatening them, saying you need to get vaccinated or you're going to lose your job, they should have said no, I'm not going to. You can go ahead and fire me, but I'm not leaving until you do. And when you do, I'm going to sue. When I had a company that I was working for told me I needed to get vaccinated, I made a big stink about it. And I told them flat out, I said, I will not get vaccinated, period. And I said, I don't care if the vaccine works and if it's good and if I should get vaccinated. I'm not going to because you told me I have to. The moment they told me I had to, I knew right then and there it was not right. Something was wrong. And I said, there's no way I'm going to allow you to coerce me into getting something and a medical procedure, getting, something stuck into my veins. No way. And I said, and I remember having a conversation with one of my supervisors, and he was, asking me, he didn't understand why I was so upset. And I told him, I said, the reason I'm upset is because this is America. Since when do we allow our government to tell us what we have to put into our bodies? Period. I said, I'm not going to subject myself to this. And I'm pissed because the company that we work for would even allow this. They should be going and suing the government on our behalf. They should be protecting us, as their employees against, a tyrannical government. And so I decided at that moment that I was no longer going to work there. And so I decided to go start my own company. And you know what? It has been a lot of hard work. It has been harder than anything that I've ever done other than maybe campaigning. That's like double the work. But starting my own company has been hard, but you know what? I succeeded and my company is profitable and I make more money now than I made before. And it's been a really, really good thing. And I can tell the government to go stuff it when they tell me that I have to stick a needle in my arm. Not going to happen.
Yeah, it's about the whole vaccine thing. I was asked by many people that, oh, we didn't know you're anti-vax. I'm like, I'm not. I'm anti-force. I will not do what you tell me I have to do, because I didn't come to America so you could tell me what to do. If I wanted to do that, I would have just stayed in Islamic Republic of Iran and let them tell me what to do. I will respect you. You want to take the vaccine? Good for you. I don't want to take the vaccine. Good for me. This is how America runs. You do you, I do me. As long as we don't hurt each other or ourselves, it's called freedom. And it does come with, responsibilities. If I choose to practice my freedom and take the vaccine and then have blood clot and then a stroke and pass away, well, that was the responsibility came with my freedom of choice, just like someone who takes the vaccine. But back to the spiritual battle you were talking about, Nate, I want to touch on something because that I agree with that 100%. I've been screaming on top of my lungs that we need to bring God back to our lives, to our community, and to our country. Not only that, we also need to differentiate. Now, in America, we have the First Amendment. On the First Amendment, there's the freedom of religion. But I do believe that certain religions needs to be studied and excluded from that freedom, that amendment. And why do I say that? One of the reasons, we have, I'm going to say we're mainly godless in America. We are. And the reason I say that is we have the Muslims who worship not God, but Allah. We have the atheist population, which is growing rapidly because apparently now it's fashion. If you're not an atheist, you don't fit in anymore. And then we have the Christians who are always looking the other way. We're always turning the other cheek because we're supposed to be nice, which I correct. By the way, I've been saved very recently, 2017. I don't claim to know it all. I'm still learning my faith. But one thing I do know is we are not supposed to be nice because the definition of word nice by itself means stupid. We're supposed to be kind. Two very different things. Being kind, fine, but at the same time, I always use this phrase, Nate. I'm glad you said that, what you did with your old job. There are so many tables that our fellow Christians are running towards that Jesus himself would flip over.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
But as you said, we don't have proper guidance. We don't have churches that are preaching the gospel. We have churches that are preaching what will keep their 501c status.
That's right. So the thing with Christianity, I think that is important to remember, in not just. I think the issue is that when it comes to God and people finding God, they need to find God on their own terms. Like you can't force it, right? You even as a parent, you can try to teach your children about God, and you can try to educate them about the Bible and bring them to church. And I do think parents should do that. But at the end of the day, it needs to be their own personal decision, because it needs to be a relationship with God that they have. As far as Islam and other religions, any religion that is opposed to freedom, opposed to that concept of people coming to God on their own terms in developing that relationship, their own personal philosophy of God, to me it is dangerous. And so I think that when you have to force somebody to believe in something, that's not a good thing. That's un-American, and I believe it's ungodly. If God wanted us to be, his little slaves that would, just obey him no matter what, then he would have made us, without free will, without the ability to choose. But the fact is, he made us with free will. He made us with the ability to choose, so that we could choose the right thing, or we could choose the wrong thing. Now, I do think that we are seeing the beginnings of a revival in our country. And I'm hoping that is what will be will continue to grow on these college campuses, because it needs to happen amongst the youth. That's where it's needed. But I have full faith in God that if this revival continues, that it will turn our country around, because the next generation, they will be wise to a lot of these things that we're seeing that are going on right now. They'll be wise to it, and they will vie for something different. They will want freedom, because they will see that freedom is ultimately the greatest expression of how God made us, was to be free. I think that there's a danger in anything that is coerced or is forced, whether it's the vaccine, whether it's religion, whether it is, political correctness and speech. Right now, there's people in Congress on both sides, pushing for the banning of TikTok and censoring it. I think that's dangerous. I think that when the government starts telling the American people, telling adults what they can and cannot listen to, I think we should be suspect of that. I think we should absolutely be suspicious, because we're adults. Now I do agree that there are some restrictions on kids. I think that, it's fair for the government to say, hey, we don't want kids looking at pornography. We don't want kids, drinking alcohol, these types of things. But ultimately, as adults, we should be as free as possible, so long as we're not hurting another person. And I think that when we try to tell, when the government starts telling us what platforms that we are allowed to go on and what platforms we're not allowed to go on, and I think we end up in a dangerous situation, because first off, I don't trust any of them. And so when they tell me that China is this great threat to us, in terms of TikTok and their influence, I can't help but realize, China, I'm sure they're doing terrible things, and the Chinese Communist Party, I am 100% opposed to. I think they're evil to their core, and I think they should be destroyed. But when it comes to an application like TikTok, I can tell you, at least 5 or 6 other applications that are American, products, if you will, that our own government is doing the same, if not worse, than what China is doing through TikTok. They're spying on us. They are censoring us. They are shutting down our voice. They are using it as a tool to go after people whose ideology maybe is a little different than theirs. All of these things, like, how do you think they found all these people from January 6th? They found them because they were using these tools that were on their phones. They found them by looking at people's, social media messaging. They found them by going to their Facebook pages and seeing how they posted. That's how they found them. That should be illegal. The government should not be involved in that. And the fact that they are makes them just as much an enemy to the United States as the Chinese Communist Party, as far as I'm concerned. So we need to be careful about any attempts to censor or any attempts to coerce us into anything. You are 100% right in that. The moment that what we should be standing up against is any force that is used against us and our will. So
exactly.
I think that's,
especially when, as you mentioned, there is double standard and hypocrisy written all over it. I'm a TikTok user. I've been on TikTok for a couple of years now. And whenever I was told that, oh, don't use TikTok, it does facial recognition and all that, I'm like, you do realize I have a smartphone, right? I'm past that point. Now, does it matter if Chinese government is looking at me, or the Russian government, or Islamic Republic of Iran, or the occupying members of White House? No. They're all, as you said, they're all the same to me. But I agree, there is so much double standard and hypocrisy, taking us back to, before we run out of time, to the opening of this program, the double standard and hypocrisy. People like Hillary Clinton will face no consequences, not even charges, not even anything. But J6 prisoners are still in prison. Some of them don't even have court date yet. And if you look at both cases, without any affiliation with parties, just as a human, you look at both cases, both evidence, you come to realize, ladies and gentlemen, that we need to save our country before we become China's communist or a Marxist socialist country, or even worse, a Islamist Marxist, being red green axis. I don't want to say we're out of time, but if we keep looking the other way and covering up for Republicans while pointing finger at Democrats or vice versa, we might as well do run out of time. And I don't know what there is to be done at that point. And I'm not being, yes, I understand at the end, we all know the end game. We know what's going to happen at the end. But we're a creation of God because we play a role. On that long rant, Nate, before we run out of time, what would you leave our audience with everything you've been through, everything you faced, everything you witnessed, everything you research? In a minute or two, what would you leave our audience with as of this very moment and where we are? What do we do? What are your last words of wisdom for them?
I'm going to repeat something that I heard the other night at a meeting that I attended where I was speaking at. And there was a pastor that stood up and he said, look, there's a lot of things that we can do to prepare ourselves, and we should absolutely be fighting against, this, the evil that we see in the world and the attacks against our freedom. He said, but number one, more important than anything is get right with God, because you don't know what the future holds. And if you're not right with God, we're all going to die someday. The only question is whether we die soon or whether we die later. And I would say to the American people and to people who are listening to this is get right with God. Make sure that you know your salvation. Make sure that you know where you're going to go. Because at the end of this all, we are going to be held accountable and we are going to stand before our God. And I know that no matter what anybody does to me, no matter what anybody who attempts to try to destroy my life or attack me or kill me, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. At the end of the day, I know where I'm going, and that is what gives me courage. That is what gives me hope, and that is what has allowed me to be the man that I am and not be afraid, of the consequences of doing the right thing. And so I think if we are expecting, for men. And I love Donald Trump, okay, but if we expect that Donald Trump is going to save this country, then we're wrong. If we expect that Nate Cain is going to go to Congress and save this country, you're wrong. It's not going to be individuals. It's not going to be policies. It's not going to be by might. It's not going to be by the fact that, look, I could turn my camera around and show you all the guns that I have on my wall, and I got a lot of them. I love guns. And I'm a 100% Second Amendment advocate. But if we think that it's our strength, our military, our weapons, our guns, our ability to defend ourselves that's going to save us, we're wrong. The only thing that is going to save us is God. And he will use other tools and things like people like Donald Trump, people like myself. The fact that we have, the right to bear arms, the fact that we have these freedoms, he will use those things as part of that plan to save us, but ultimately it's him that saves us. And so my message to everybody, and I don't care, this has nothing to do with whether or not, I'm not trying to get elected by saying the things that people want to hear. I'm speaking the truth. And if I get elected, then the Lord will have more for me to do in Congress. And if I don't get elected, well, then at least I told the truth. But the truth is, our country is in a place of spiritual darkness right now. And the only way that this country gets saved is when all of us Americans, especially all of us believers, get on our knees and pray and seek God's face and ask for him to turn the hearts of the people around and to turn this nation around. And I believe that if enough of us do it, he will hear and he will turn his ear towards us and he will, involve himself in these situations, whether it's by removing the corrupt individuals that are in Congress now or in the presidency now or in the courts now, or whether it is, him, causing a revival to break out. Whatever the case, I think that there is still hope. I don't think that we should give up. And I'm of the belief that, if we're going to go down, I'm going to go down fighting. I'm not going to give up, and I'm not going to acquiesce to the devil. I'm not giving him one more inch in my life or in my community or in my country as far as I can help it.
Amen, amen, amen. Words, profound wisdom. Thank you, Nate. One last question for you. Where do our audience go to support you, follow you, and get behind you?
So you can go to www.natecain4wv.com. So that's Nate Cain 4westvirginia.com. Nate Cain 4wv.com. I'm also that same Nate Cain 4WV. You can find me on pretty much all social media. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, of course, True Social, Gab, Getter, Parler. Telegram with Nate Cain 4WV. You can find me on there. And if you go to my website, the truth is I do need to raise money for my campaign. I mean, you can't run a campaign, on nothing. So anybody who's willing to donate towards my campaign, you can go to my website and there'll be a link up at the top where you can click on and you can donate to my campaign. And that helps me to do things like print out the cards and flyers and mailers that I need to do, and to pay for renting spaces so that I can hold events and do venues and talk to people. I really do believe that, that I'm supposed to run here. I believe God's called me to do this. And that means I need to go around and I need to speak in every single one of the 27 counties of the 2nd District of West Virginia. So, those are things that cost money for me to do. And I need as much support as I can get. I think it's important that we support candidates, even for those of you that might be listening that are not from West Virginia. It doesn't matter. It's 1 out of 435 votes in Congress. And in order to be able to change things, we need to get people elected that believe in those values and the things that we believe in. And that's why I've even supported candidates outside of West Virginia, to help them hopefully try to win.
Agreed. Nate, thank you so much again for your wisdom, for your time, for your bravery. Thank you. Keep up the good work. And hopefully we have you back on with some updates soon.
Thank you. That would be great.
Absolutely. And to our audience, as always, thank you so much for staying with us until now. And again, thank you for being here while I tried my very best to sit in for Dr. Jamie Glazov. He will be back next week. Until then, please stay safe, stay vigilant. May God bless you. May God bless America. Goodbye.